Arrow Season 5, Episode 8, Invasion. Now, this is part 3 of the 4-part crossover. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was pretty cool. I actually felt like this one, because of course each episode for, all the series, it still is that series. So it's like, the Flash episode still focused a lot on the Flash characters. I mentioned this already, but Supergirl didn't even really have anything to do with the crossover. But I was like, okay, I'm curious how they're going to do that for Arrow. And I felt this one was way more Arrow than crossover. Like, I felt like Flash really dealt with the crossover a lot. And maybe it's because it was the introduction, so they were like, alright, we have to kind of, kick it off this way. So we had like all the characters meeting up, and of course, it's like everybody met Supergirl, Supergirl met everybody else. They trained with her, so you got a bunch of different heroes from the different shows, fighting against Supergirl or kind of attacking her. I mean, nothing was affecting her, of course. And then we have the ending where you have a bunch of different characters, including Supergirl, who's, totally from a different Earth. So they had a good sort of crossover thing where a lot of different characters were infected. And this episode, I felt it really focused a lot more on Arrow, which makes a lot of sense. I didn't think that was a bad thing or anything like that. I still really enjoyed it, and it makes a ton of sense, as I mentioned, if you watch my Flash review. This is the 100th episode for Green Arrow, and I thought it was really good. I actually really enjoyed this one. I liked the idea of them going through this sort of, kind of the typical thing we see, I feel like, with aliens. Whenever they abduct people, it's always like, oh, let's put them in, like, their perfect dream. It's either you get tortured and it's horrific, or you get put in your perfect dream. It's one of the two. It's either really, really bad, or it's like really, really great, and then you figure it out because somebody says something and it triggers your memory. So it was that sort of situation. And I like the way it played out because we had multiple people within the dream sequence. It wasn't like one person, and that's kind of why I thought it was really cool, because it's like, okay, starts off with Oliver, of course, as the main character, and he's going through, and then we see the other characters kind of have these flashes as well, because, like when Sara shows up, she sees that Laurel has a necklace, and it's like, oh, it's a bird, is this a bird? She's like, it's a canary, and it made, like, Sara jump back, because she had, like, a flash, and I was like, I like that, because we get to see what triggers the different characters and stuff like that, because that probably wouldn't have had the same influence, like on Ray. Like if somebody said canary to him, it probably wouldn't have had the same effect because of how closely attached the canary idea is to, Sara. So I like that. I thought it was really cool that having them go through that, and everyone's kind of in these perfect positions, and Oliver's about to marry Laurel, and of course Sarah's alive. She never died and came back and all that stuff. Both their parents are alive and everything like that. Sadly, we don't get to see Roy or Tommy. So those are those are the only two people we didn't get to see. Slade does show up, at least in costume. It was somebody in the costume, but Slade shows up. Damian Dark shows up. I like what they did though with Tommy and Roy. With Roy they didn't really make a reference to him, but with Tommy, they made a reference to the fact that he was in a different show, because they're like, oh, he's I can't believe like he's a doctor and stuff, and he's in Chicago. He's on a show called Chicago Med because he plays a doctor in a show based in Chicago. So when they were making that reference, I thought that was really funny, because I'm like, they could easily do that and it would work, and that's exactly what they did. So I was super happy when that happened. I was like, all right, it would have been awesome to see him in the show. But I love the way they did the reference. It's like, yeah, it's not like Chicago's next door, and it's like, okay, for people that know and the only reason I happen to know that is because of my girlfriend, actually, because she watches the Chicago shows. It's like Chicago Fire, PD, and Med is the new one, and she was watching that, and I was like, hey, that's Tommy from Arrow. So I was happy to actually know that reference, because otherwise it just seemed random dialogue, but it was actually a reference to the fact that he's on a show in Chicago, or based in Chicago, playing a doctor. So I was like, that's actually awesome. I love that reference. They do have him show up. They have both Roy and Tommy show up visually during that weird ending sequence with Oliver. That was like the only thing I didn't like. I was like, okay, I thought just visually, I just thought it looked really weird. So that was the only reason I didn't like that little moment. It made a lot of sense to have everybody there, and it made sense to have them all CG, because they had most of the actors, but they were only missing two, so it made sense to make everyone CG, and then just kind of throw them in there, just throw Tommy and Roy in there. For Roy, it looked like really CG. It looked like his head was placed on somebody else's body. It was like they just didn't have a clip of him standing still, just looking forward or something. So I thought that was kind of funny. But I really enjoyed how they did it. And, Oliver's going through and he's having these flashes, and he ends up running into Diggle and Felicity. Diggle, being the Green Arrow in this universe. And I like how that played out. And Diggle, it was really funny. But when Oliver went to the cave and he found Diggle, and Diggle was like yelling at him and stuff, I was like, Diggle sounds like the devil. His voice was like so insanely deep because he was doing like the Oliver thing where he like makes his voice deeper. And I just thought that was funny. I was like, he sounds like the devil. Like his voice is so incredibly deep when he's yelling and stuff. It was just funny to me. But I like the way it played out where they end up teaming up and stuff. And it's like, I'm having these flashes and things like that, like what you said, kind of got me thinking. So they start to team up. They deal with Slade, and then Sara comes in, and she's like, I was having these flashes and stuff, and it continues on until they kind of group everybody together. And I liked how they did it. I thought it was weird at first, but then I was like, actually, it makes a ton of sense because we see it mostly from Oliver's perspective of, of course, with him being the main character, as he goes through and he's like, things are weird. And by the time we get to the end, everyone's experienced the same thing. Like, they've had a bunch of flashes and stuff. So when Sara goes to Ray, who is actually married to Felicity in this universe, she instantly just says, like, this doesn't feel right. And he's like, no, it doesn't, because he was already having those flashes like crazy. And I thought it was super fast at first, and then I was like, what? It actually makes sense that it would be really fast. Like, why would Oliver be the only one having flashes? So, even though Ray didn't have, like, a huge part in the, like, sort of the alternate thing, it was kind of cool the way they did it, because it's like, yeah, it would make sense that he'd recognize it on his own, especially with him being, like, a genius and stuff. And then when they go to Thea, it's like, yeah, she knew as well, and she made the decision to stay. Like, she didn't say anything to anybody else. She just chose to stay. And I thought that was a good moment. I was like, that's a pretty cool moment. And of course, she decides to, change her mind, and she does end up leaving with them. Of course, I figured that was going to happen. But I remember thinking when they were talking, I was like, that would be a crazy thing if that's how she seriously like died in the series. Is that she like stayed in this fake world and let herself, be captured or whatever they did with her. I was like, that'd be crazy. I was like, I know they aren't gonna do that, but I was like, that would be an insane way to have the character leave a show. Like that, it would be insanely. It would be really great, but just like, holy crap, I can't believe that's how that happened. But that would have been a cool ending. But I prefer, that she actually does live. So to have a crazy fight scene where they go up against everybody. Merlin's there. Slade, fake Slade shows up again. Um, Damien Dark. Damien has his army people. Slade has his army people. I forgot what he used to call them, but have a cool little fight scene. Everybody's fighting somebody. Um, the only person that was really getting beat up was Ray. I was like, man, Ray's just getting like kicked across the ground and thrown all over the place. Sara was holding her own. Um, Oliver was like destroying that version of Slade. I was like, I kind of wish they reversed it where Oliver was getting beat up just because it was Slade, like even the fake version. But that was kind of the point. It was like, oh, it's their subconscious, so it's not like the be all end all. It's not Slade Wilson. It's like a version of him that was mentally created, based off of Oliver's memories. So he wasn't super epic, but it was still sweet to see the costume and everything like that. But he was fighting. He was doing fine. Ray was just getting his butt whooped. Diggle ends up getting shot. They have like almost like a Wild West draw where like they both shoot at each other at the same time, sort of thing. But they get out of there and they get on the ship, and ultimately they're able to escape thanks to the Wave Rider, because Felicity and the team, like Felicity and the B team, really, except for Evelyn, which I figured was going to happen. I was like, I figured that they wouldn't have her in the episode because of the way the last episode of Arrow went off. But they have their whole little thing in this episode, and they end up finding them, and so that brings in the Wave Rider. We get to see Nate show up. We're going to get to see Amara show up in the finale for Legends, so we're going to have all the Legends. But I like the way they did it. I was like, alright, that was really cool. I like how they focused on, giving us all the, most of the characters, all the actors that they could at least, from the history of the series. We even got to see Lance, as Captain again, which I thought was cool. And I enjoyed that. I was like, that was actually a really cool way to do that. And then the real world stuff, I actually really enjoyed that as well, because we got to see, of course, Flash and Supergirl. I think Supergirl, because it's like, with her being on a different Earth, they're going to definitely make sure that she's in every single one. Plus, she's the main character of the show, so it's like Oliver, Barry, and Kara are going to be in all the things because they're the main characters. Like they are the number one character for all their shows. So, of course, they have to show up throughout every single episode, because like Cisco was in this as well. But, Caitlyn doesn't show up, Iris doesn't show up, all the other Flash characters, they stay, where they normally are. They stay in Central City. So, I like how they did that. And like I said, it wasn't like the biggest crossover like the last one, because like none of the Legends showed up in this episode until the very end. Like Nate is the only person that showed up from Legends, and that's kind of why I feel like this episode was a bit further from like the big crossover than Flash was, because everyone was in that. It was like, hey, here are the Legends. Here's a reference to them. Outside of Sara, but she started off on Arrow, so it almost like it's one of those things where it doesn't really count as her being a part of the Legends, because technically she was a part of Arrow before she ended up being a Legend. So as far as the Legends goes, like, you technically have Sara, and Ray as well, but like, once again, both of those characters started on Arrow, just like a lot of the characters, like what they did with Stein in Flash's episode. Like, that's where he started, so that's why they took time to focus on him, because it makes sense to do that in the Flash show, because it's like, alright, you can do it in 2 shows with him, because that's where he started. Just like with Sara and Ray, they both started in Arrow, so you can have 2 episodes that have a bit of focus on them too. But I still really enjoyed it. We got to see, and this is a clip I really enjoyed from the promo, but it was Supergirl when she punched that woman, and Barry runs and hits her at super speed and knocks her back down. That was really sweet in the trailer, and I was excited to see that. I was like, I know exactly how this is going to play out, but I'm still excited to see it, and I thought that was a really sweet visual moment. But that was really cool. They have Renee kind of hating, metahumans and anyone with superpowers, but then they save his butt, and he's like, I'm glad you guys have powers now. So, he grew like the tiniest, itty bittiest little bit. Everybody else was just being super nerds, like, holy crap, you guys are awesome, like super speed and super strength and this and that. So everybody else was just like having a great time. And Cisco is there with them, and he's like, oh, your tech guy references movies and stuff, and so they made, jokes about that. But I really did enjoy this episode. I thought it was a good callback for the series. We got to see most of the actors show up. It would have been awesome if they did have, like, Roy just thrown in there, and Tommy as well, but they're doing their own thing, so they, sadly couldn't get the actors in. Those are the only 2 guys who they're, busy right now. But a great episode. It was cool to see, a lot of the characters come back. Everybody's in, like, all these different positions. Diggle, being Green Arrow. So it was really cool to see that. And they kind of work through this stuff as a team. And it's like, all right, well, this is happening. And, this person was with me during this situation and stuff like that. And ultimately, when we get to the end of the episode, we find out that the Dominators took all these characters because they aren't metahumans. Like, they're just humans, so they can't fight back. So whatever is going on, they, the Dominators can't really use their machines on metahumans, probably because it's just too different from what they've experienced before, which makes sense because they, were probably abducting humans in the past when they've dealt, when they had their wars and stuff. So, that leads to them heading towards Earth at the end of the episode because they were looking for some sort of crazy weakness, and I don't know what to expect. I mean, of course, they're gonna beat the aliens naturally, but I am very excited to see how this final episode plays out. We're gonna get the rest of the Legends coming in, so we're gonna get Amara, we're gonna get Nate. It seems like a lot of the characters end up getting locked up. Like, they have a scene where Cisco and Felicity like bust through a door with machine guns, and Mick is like, "Oh wow, we're saved by dorks" or something. So I'm excited to see this finale and how they end up defeating the Dominators and stuff. And it seems like that's mostly what they're going to be doing in the next one, because, like I said, the Barry stuff, like with Flash, it was like, all right, well, the good guys got controlled, so that was like the point of the episode. This really didn't have much to do with the crossover. It just kind of threw the characters together, and like the on Earth pretty much was really where the crossover took place, and the Arrow characters were just trapped for the most part until we got to see them. Like Oliver, when he picked that gun up and he was just like shooting, it was basically like a flamethrower type weapon. And then they get the ship and the Wave Rider, but it was mostly just Arrow based and didn't have much to do with how do we take out the Dominators and stuff. They weren't able to do it initially because they blew up that little thing when they tried to mix the human technology with the aliens. They beat up the random villain of the episode. I don't even remember her name. I think, I think he called her like Cyberwoman, and I don't even remember who said that. I think it may have been Rory. I think he was the one that said that, and he called her like Cyberwoman. So, they didn't do too much there. Is like, they didn't, at least they tried to, but they didn't really get anywhere. So Legends is going to be like, all right, final push. Let's wipe all these things out. I'm sure we'll get some more story with Stein and stuff like that. Get to see what everybody's doing because, like I said, none of the Legends were really in this episode. So I'm excited for this finale. I think this was definitely a good 100th episode for Arrow. We got to see all the characters together in new situations. We got to see most of the B team work in their own mission. They had some cool stuff with Renee, like I said, the scene when they saved his life, and he's like, the green guy would have kicked my ass if I, spoke like that to him, and Car and Barry were both like, yep, like yeah, he would have. I love that scene. It was just a little thing, and it was like Renee was basically able to do whatever he wanted to do, and so that's how it kind of allowed him to grow for like that tiny little bit. But I certainly enjoyed this. I think it was definitely a good 100th episode for the series. So I'm excited to see where they get to with this crossover. They have the alien ship now, so I assume that'll allow them to really get a good grasp on how they defeat the Dominators, because that was like the whole point of this episode. Was like, oh, we're trying to mix the technologies together. Now they have the Wave Rider, which is way more advanced, and it can even understand the Dominator language, at least loosely. So I assume that that's how they're going to get their big push. Like, alright, this is how we get the push to take out the Dominators. They can use whatever tech is on the ship, kind of analyze it, use Gideon, all that stuff, and then, they're good to go. But enjoyed this episode. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts. I guess there's not too much to ask. I mean, we had a good sort of reminiscent type of episode with it being the 100th episode. It was basically like the best version of a clip show you could possibly have, because all the clips were just in like 2-second flashes. It wasn't like, hey, remember this time we did this, and then it's like 5 minutes of stuff you've already seen. So it's about the best way you could possibly do a clip show, I think. But I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was very good. A nice callback, to the series, just the imagery that they had. They went back. It was basically like early Green Arrow, because they were still calling him the Hood and stuff like that. So they did a bunch of references. It was basically like in the very beginning of the series and stuff like that. Diggle saying like, you can't know my secret, things like that. So I love what they did with the references. The crossover was still fun, and in general, it's just a really good episode. But of course, with this being a part of the crossover, I want to know how you guys think they're going to end this crossover, how they're going to defeat the Dominators. They got the mothership basically going to Earth to blow it up, I'm assuming. So I want to know how you guys think they're going to conclude the crossover, and I want to know what your favorite part was about I guess the fake reality that they were in. Like, was it getting to see the characters? Was it like getting to see kind of maybe the ending fight sequence where they just had a bunch of villains, classic villains thrown in together? What was your favorite moment from the virtual reality sequence that everybody was kind of thrown into? And like I said, I want to know how you guys predict that they're going to actually end the big crossover, how they're going to win is a more appropriate question, because they're going to win and nobody's going to die. So I want to know what you guys think about that as well. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.